Hello guys, this is Mr. Light. I was thinking about last week and I realized that many of you haven't really got the idea behind food webs, food chains, and energy pyramids. So what I wanted to do today was kind of slow down and help you guys understand it a little bit better. So the first thing you need to know about energy is that it flows through living systems. Now, the Earth gets all of its energy from the sun. So, everything that's alive on Earth gets its energy directly or indirectly from the sun. Now, you might be saying, how does that even work? Well, it works through a process called photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process that plants use to take the energy that's light energy. In science, we call light energy radiant energy. So plants take radiant energy from the sun, that's the sunlight, and convert it into chemical energy. Now, chemical energy is also known as food. Photosynthesis is a little complex, but not too crazy, but we'll talk about it next week. What I want you to focus on right now is that plants are the ones creating food for the entire world. So everything gets its energy from the sun directly, that's plants get it directly, or indirectly, that's everything else. So all of your consumers are those things that eat plants or other things get their energy from the sun. So as you take a look at the top food chain, you'll notice that that food chain includes a picture of the sun, while the bottom doesn't have the picture of the sun. However, it is assumed that the plants that are, or the plant, the grass that's in the bottom picture, is getting its energy from the sun because it does photosynthesis, because it's a plant. And plants are the ones making food for the entire planet. So the grasshopper that eats the grass is getting energy from the plant, but the plant got its energy from the sun. Plants make that energy through photosynthesis. They make food from sunlight. Okay, so the next thing I want you to pay close attention to as you look at these two food chains is that there are arrows. The arrows indicate how energy is flowing from one thing to the next. And the arrows will always point toward the thing that's getting the energy. So if we started off with the sun is giving energy to the grass in the top picture. The grasshopper will eat the grass and get energy from that grass because, again, the grass is a producer, it's a plant, it's making food through photosynthesis. So the grasshopper is a consumer and it has to go find the grass to eat. So once it eats, it gets energy from that plant. Then let's look at the mouse or the shrew who will consume or eat the grasshopper. The arrow goes from the grasshopper to the shrew or to the mouse, and it's transferred from one organism to the next by eating. And the arrows always point in the direction of the flow of energy, or they flow in the direction of the thing that is eating. Now, a very common misconception is that the arrow should go toward the thing that's getting eaten. So a lot of people, when they look at food webs and food chains, will incorrectly draw their arrows from the thing that's doing the eating toward the thing that's getting eaten. And because it seems like, well, yeah, this is eating that, so the arrow goes this way. But it's actually the opposite of that. The thing that's doing the eating is getting the energy, so it gets the arrow pointing towards it. Okay, so now you should be able to make your own food chain.
Last week, you guys were given cards with different organisms on it, and you were expected to create a food chain. So, in order to do that, we always want to start with a plant. The reason we start with a plant is because they're the ones making the energy from the sun's energy. So they're taking that radiant energy, converting it to chemical energy through the process of photosynthesis and making food. So you always start with a producer and then you move on to a primary consumer, which just means it's the first consumer. So first consumers or primary consumers are the things that eat plants. So if I'm going to make a food chain from these cards, the first thing I want to do is start with a plant. So where are the plants? Okay, so that should be fairly easy to figure out. You've got the red clover, the plants that start with an X, which I cannot pronounce, the feathergrass, and the common poppy. So when you start your food chain or your food web or your energy pyramid, you always start with a producer. So those are going to be our starting point because they are the source of energy for all of the other organisms, either directly if they're a primary consumer or indirectly if they are a secondary or tertiary or quaternary consumer. All right, finally, let's briefly look at this food chain. It's got a more complete picture than most food chains that you'll see because it does include the sun. It doesn't leave it out, and a food chain is not incorrect if it leaves it out, because if it does, then again, it's assumed that the plant will be the starting point because plants are making the food from the sunlight. So the plant is giving its energy to the grasshopper when the grasshopper eats it. The grasshopper gives its energy to the mouse when the mouse eats it. The mouse gives its energy to the snake when the snake eats it. And the hawk gets energy from the snake when it eats the snake. In this picture, you see some fungi down there, which are, in this case, mushrooms. Um, Now, those are decomposers, and some energy pyramids, food webs, and food chains will include decomposers. This probably isn't the most accurate view because, in reality, all of these things, including the plant, the grasshopper, the snake, the mouse, and the bird, they all poop. Well, the plant doesn't poop, but all of the other animals poop, and they for sure all die eventually. And anything that poops or dies ends up getting decomposed by bacteria or fungus or other types of decomposers. So in reality, you would have probably arrows going from each one of these to the decomposers because they all will die eventually and get decomposed. And then those, when they get decomposed, they turn back into soil, which then plants can use to build their parts. And it's kind of like a cycle. If you remember when we looked at The Lion King, where Mufasa was talking to Simba, and he was talking about the cycle of life or the circle of life, and how he would die and then turn to grass, and then the antelope would eat the grass, and then just continuing that cycle. So this is a more complete view, and sometimes you will see this, but not very often. So if you do see decomposers involved, just know that all living things will eventually die and become decomposed and turn to soil, which then plants can use to grow. All right, just to recap, what you guys need to know is that the sun provides energy for our planet, and the sun is not a living thing. However, living things use the sun's energy to create food. Those living things that do that are plants. They do it through the process of photosynthesis, converting radiant energy into chemical energy in the form of food, which they use and store, which then other organisms come and eat from them, get that energy, pass it on to other organisms through the process of eating. And a food chain, a food web, or an energy pyramid is really trying to give us a part of a picture of what energy is actually doing as it moves through living systems. Remember that the arrows point in the direction of the flow of energy, and that the arrows are always pointing at the thing that's doing the eating or the thing that's getting the energy. So whatever organism is getting the energy or whatever organism is eating has the arrow pointed towards it.